that we work so hard to do. But it's just a certain division that needs to be brought to everyone's attention and understanding that, no, this is something that's been going on. And it's just getting to a point where it's like, all right, now enough is enough. I think there's
enough is enough, man. Enough is enough, man. Yeah. Yeah, enough is enough.
a larger conversation that needs to be had that is really above us. And I think that is the part that we really need to get to. So hopefully at All-Star, we can have an opportunity and a conversation because at this time, we something needs to change.
At All-Star, they want to have an opportunity and a conversation. That's what I was alluding to in the beginning. They're going to walk into Caitlin Clark's room.
We can sit back and we can watch what's happening to Caitlin Clark. And they know how they're treating her, why they're treating her that way.
She became a roadshow. And I don't know that, and I don't want to slight anybody in college, but I don't remember seeing that in my time. And that's held true. We've wanted a player or a league that can, sort of transcend some of these spaces and have a roadshow. The NBA's had their players that people come to see, right? So when the Wolves sell tickets, there are certain games that they know people are going to come watch certain players. Caitlin Clark and some of the other rookies give us that. Obviously, Caitlin, being the headliner.
The playoff bracket is set, and Indiana drew the matchup that the accountability conversation has been anticipating since the Thomas incident made every future Connecticut Sun game carry additional weight beyond the competitive result. Alyssa Thomas is on that roster. She received a one-game suspension for fist-to-the-throat contact with Clark earlier this season. She served that suspension. She came back. And now these two teams are going to play each other in a playoff series, where the competitive and personal history between these specific players is going to define the atmosphere from the opening tip. The Connecticut Sun is not an easy first-round opponent. They are the team that Alyssa Thomas herself told the Basketball World Indiana could not prepare for, because White brought the Connecticut system to Indianapolis, and the Sun already know everything it is going to do. That statement now exists as the backdrop for a playoff series between the team that created the system and the team currently running it. The bracket delivered the most loaded possible first-round scenario. Everything this season has produced is now compressed into a playoff series.
Look, man, the WNBA All-Star draft just been had, man, and these are the teams, man. And for Team Spoon, we have the baby goat, the face of the league, the biggest in the league, one of the best and greatest women's basketball players to ever exist. I'm talking about good from birth, great from birth, Caitlin Clark.
Connecticut is the 4 seed, Indiana is the 5 seed. The competitiveness of that seeding difference tells you something specific about where each organization is relative to the other at this specific moment in the season. The Sun have the institutional stability and the organizational continuity that produces consistent playoff positioning. They have been a playoff team year after year with the specific organizational identity that long-term coaching and roster construction produces. They know who they are and what they do, and they execute it with the kind of collective confidence that comes from having done it together for long enough that the system is internalized rather than installed. Indiana has Clark and Boston and a coaching staff whose system has been publicly identified by a former Connecticut player as identical to the one the Sun already know how to defend. That organizational vulnerability is not a competitive secret. It is in the public record from Alyssa Thomas's own mouth before a regular season game. The seeding is close enough that Indiana can win this series. The organizational context surrounding the seeding is the specific concern that makes winning it complicated.
Fever gang! The god Caitlin Clark vaporized the Seattle Storm, dropping 45 points, a 45 and 10 double-double. Let's fucking go, Caitlin Clark. We see all the fucking haters. We see all you bitch-ass clowns switching up on the god Caitlin Clark. We see y'all listening to the narratives, all the bullshit, all the fucking clowns all across the world. Oh, she ain't living up to the hype and dropped 45 points.
Well, they're going to knock on the door. Caitlin Clark's going to open the door to her hotel room. She's going to peek through it, and there's going to be that, that sliding thing on the door, and all there's going to be is like the chain. And she's going to peek through and say, oh shit, she's gonna try to close the door, and then all the players at one time, Brittany Griner, Asia Wilson, they're all gonna just, let me, they're gonna bum rush her, they're gonna bum rush into that room, and they're gonna tie Caitlin Clark up to a chair. They're gonna tell Caitlin Clark, you're not leaving this room until you come out and you denounce those pesky fans of yours.
The matchup analysis begins with the most honest available competitive assessment, and the honest assessment is that these are two genuinely good basketball teams whose specific strengths and weaknesses create interesting tactical problems for each other's coaching staffs. Connecticut's length is real. Their defensive versatility is real. Their ability to switch defensively and maintain coverage integrity across multiple ball reversals is the specific defensive quality that creates the most problems for Indiana's offensive system when that system is operating as White designed it. The specific problem is that Indiana's offensive system as White designed it is the same system Connecticut spent 2 years learning under White before she left for Indiana. The advantage of facing a team that has seen your system from the inside is not a marginal one. It is the specific competitive advantage that Alyssa Thomas quantified when she told the basketball world that they know everything Indiana is going to do. Clark operating outside the system is Connecticut's nightmare. Clark operating within it is their preparation.
Look at Asia Wilson barking at the ref. Look how she's talking to the refs. Y'all were cool with this. Look, so much aggression. Let me guess, y'all gonna call this passion. Because this is what y'all do. Just last night, y'all was trying to trash Caitlin because she was upset and spoke her mind to the refs as she should have. Because the ref continued to not give her calls that we can clearly see are calls. But I guess when Asia Wilson does it, it's fine. Why?
The Sophie Cunningham factor in this playoff series is the element that the tactical preview conversation has been underweighting, and that deserves specific analytical attention before Game 1 tips off. Sophie has spent this season establishing herself as the specific competitive presence that does not accommodate the physical environment opposing teams bring against Clark. She has been on the floor for every major confrontation this season. She pointed back at Dana Bonner for 22 seconds. She went rogue on the game winner. She has been the most visible embodiment of competitive solidarity with Clark that any player on this roster has demonstrated. Connecticut is going to be physical. That is the organizational identity they bring into every competitive situation, and it is not going to change, because the calendar says playoff basketball is now the context. Sophie is going to be there when that physicality arrives. The question is whether the officiating crew assigned to this series is going to make Connecticut pay for the physical approach before it escalates the way it has escalated in previous meetings between these specific players. Sophie will handle her end. She always does.
Business, and then they dropped this crappy hit piece on Caitlin Clark, attacking her, attacking the fans, and trying to diminish her accomplishments. That's why I'm not a big fan of Time Magazine picking Asia Wilson for Athlete of the Year. I think this was pre-planned because they're saying a lot of crap about Caitlin Clark, her accomplishments. To me, the articles about Caitlin Clark has nothing to do with Asia Wilson, and all it does is reveals Asia Wilson's character.
The Clark-Boston two-man game is the specific offensive weapon that Connecticut's defensive preparation is most focused on neutralizing, and that Indiana's offensive production most depends on operating at full capacity for the series to go Indiana's way. Both players have the individual talent to create advantages against any defensive coverage Connecticut can deploy. The combination of both players operating simultaneously creates the specific defensive problem that has no clean schematic solution, because the coverage required to take away Clark's three-point shooting opens Boston's mid-range, and the coverage required to take away Boston's interior access opens Clark's pull-up range. The question is not whether the talent is there. The question is whether Stephanie White's in-game management of the two-man game allows it to operate continuously across 4 quarters of playoff basketball, or whether the rotation patterns that have defined this season reassert themselves in the critical moments when the two-man game is producing advantages that the coaching staff should be sustaining rather than interrupting. Let them cook is still the most important strategic prescription available.
I've come to know Caitlin really well. She's an incredible player and also an incredible person. And She wants to focus on being the best player she can. And she's become a bit of a political football in this country, and I think it's incredibly unfair to her. I don't think that issue is ultimately about officiating. It's sort of, it's become political ping pong with her, and she's a young woman who's trying to improve her game, focus on being the best player as she can. And I don't even think it's fair to her that this has become a separate storyline.
The organizational accountability conversation that has defined this entire season does not pause for playoff basketball. It travels into the series alongside everything else, and it becomes most relevant in the specific moments when coaching decisions determine competitive outcomes. White's rotation decisions in the regular season are documented, analyzed, and identified as working against Indiana's competitive interests, with enough consistency that the pattern is no longer debatable. The 6:30 pull. The third option, play design. The Raven Johnson substitution in a one-possession game with 2 minutes remaining. Those patterns are going to be present in the playoff environment, unless White makes a deliberate and visible decision to depart from them. The opponent is going to game plan for those patterns because the documentary record of this season is public and available, and any coaching staff doing their homework has watched enough Indiana footage to identify the specific decision windows where White's substitution philosophy creates exploitable vulnerabilities. The series will tell you whether White can coach differently when everything is on the line. Section 8, MHA's absence from Game 1 is the competitive reality that Indiana has to build its game plan around, rather than around the roster it expected to have available when the playoff bracket was set. Her defensive contribution is not replaceable through depth. It is the kind of specific competitive quality that the remaining personnel compensate for collectively through scheme adjustment and increased individual defensive accountability from the players who stay on the floor in her minutes. The increased burden falls primarily on Clark defensively. Clark has spent this season navigating the specific tension between her offensive production demands and the defensive accountability that her physical profile and her positioning in White's scheme create. Adding MHA's defensive minutes to that burden while simultaneously being asked to go scorched earth offensively is the specific competitive challenge Game 1 presents. The talent is there to absorb it. The question is whether the coaching decisions surrounding that talent allow the absorption to happen efficiently enough that MHA's absence does not become the decisive competitive variable. The bracket is set. The opponent is Connecticut. Alyssa Thomas is on the roster. The one-game suspension is served, and the history travels into the series with everything attached to it still fully intact. Indiana has Clark and Boston and Sophie Cunningham and a roster that this channel has been documenting all season as more talented than its organizational environment has allowed it to demonstrate consistently. The playoff environment is the specific competitive window where that talent can assert itself in the compressed series format that rewards individual brilliance proportionally more than the long regular season does. Connecticut has the institutional advantage. They have the system knowledge. They have Thomas. They have the defensive length and versatility that creates the specific problems for Indiana's offensive approach that the accountability conversation has been identifying all season. The series is going to come down to the specific things this channel has been discussing since the first game of the year. Does Clark get to operate with the competitive freedom that produced 45 and 10 against Seattle, or does the organizational framework reassert itself in the moments when it matters most? Does Boston impose herself aggressively from the opening possession, or does the passivity that has appeared at times this season return in the playoff environment where passivity gets punished decisively? Does White make the coaching decisions that the talent available to her demands? Or does she make the rotation decisions that the regular season accountability record has documented as working against the competitive interests of the team she is supposed to be leading? Clark needs to go scorched earth. Boston needs to impose herself. Sophie needs to be Sophie. And the officiating crew assigned to this series needs to be better than the crews that have been assigned to Indiana games all season. The playoffs are here. The accountability conversation is watching. Drop your thoughts in the comments below.